Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Good Lawyer Gone Bad podcast. My name is Stuart Teicher. Today, we have the final chapter of the Michael Cohen story. And I think this is the part of the story that's going to have a lot of the stuff you're expecting to hear about. And at the end of this program, you're going to hear two things. First of all, I've got a little bit of insight into something that I think is, quite frankly, fascinating about this entire story. I'll reveal that at the end. And the other thing is, I'm going to ask you if you want me to do more on this topic. I could probably squeeze out a third part of the Michael Cohen story, and I could also explain what happened to Donald Trump in his criminal conviction in New York if you'd like me to do so. I promise to do so in a non-political way, just to literally explain what happened. If you're interested in hearing about that, let me know. Go to goodlawyersgonebad.com, go to the Contact Us section, fill out the form. It'll send an email to me directly. And while you're there, if you know anyone who wants to advertise on the podcast, please feel free to let them know about that. They can also go to the goodlawyersgonebad.com site and in the Contact Us section, send me a note, and maybe we can have some advertisers on the podcast. Right now, the sponsor is me and my CLE programs. I teach continuing legal education for a living. If you're interested in having an ethics program or a legal writing program or any of what I call the specialty credits, diversity, elimination of bias, access to justice, mental health, all of those specialty credits that sometimes fall under the ethics genre, I teach that as well. So reach out to me if you want. There's a link on the goodlawyersgonebad.com site that says about your host, and that will bring you to a link, that'll bring you to my bio, but also to a link about the programs that I have available. So welcome and enjoy the balance of the Michael Cohen story. Celebrity golf tournaments have got to be pretty fun. I've never been to one, but I could just imagine what they're like. Listen, I've been to charity tournaments, a lot of us probably have, but celebrity golf tournaments? That's got to be a whole different animal. You got booze flowing, celebrity sightings all over the course, and the press is probably running around from hole to hole trying to cover all of the fun. Stephanie Clifford says that she was at one of those events in 2006 in Lake Tahoe. Oh, have you never heard of Stephanie Clifford? Well, she's an actress, and you might have seen some of her smaller roles on movies like 40-Year-Old Virgin and Knocked Up. Of course, you might know her better from her far more extensive work in the adult film industry. It's in that industry that she went by the name Stormy Daniels. In 2006, Stormy Daniels claims that she met Donald Trump at one of those celebrity golf tournaments. And if you believe her story, she says there was more than just a meeting going on between the two of them. Daniels claims that Trump asked her to join him for a meal. Apparently, she didn't want to go, but her publicist encouraged her to do so. Stormy Daniels says that she then went to Mr. Trump's suite for dinner, and the two of them had consensual sex. At the time, it seemed like that would be the end of the story. But things change. Circumstances change. People get a little bit more interesting, and opportunities present themselves. So the story would lie dormant for about 10 years, until it exploded. 2006 was also the year that Michael Cohen started to work for Donald Trump. He helped Trump out of a jam at the Trump World Tower project over by the United Nations in New York City, and he was then brought on as a vice president and special counsel to the Trump Organization. He must have been thrilled. He was in the good graces of one of the most famous businessmen in the world. And better than just being in his good graces, he was valued. Michael Cohen was a trusted advisor and a pivotal part of the team. And not only was his legal career flourishing, but Michael Cohen was making millions in his taxi medallion business. Records reveal that over a several-year period, Cohen earned more than $2.4 million from a series of personal loans that he made to taxi operators who leased his medallions in Chicago. He made another $1.3 million off another driver that he leased medallions to in New York City. That's only 2 deals that we know about. Who knows how many more there were? Well, Michael Cohen had cash, and he had valuable assets in those taxi medallions, so he went on a borrowing and buying spree. In 2010, Cohen borrowed a crap ton of money. He got a $6 million loan, which he secured with his taxi medallions. Well, doing so makes sense, right? Those assets are valuable. They're just the kind of thing that a lending institution would accept as security for a loan. The following year, Cohen got another $14 million line of credit from the bank. You know how a line of credit works, right? The bank makes $14 million available for the borrower to draw down on. You can draw down on it incrementally, up to $14 million. Once it's drawn down, you have to pay it back. If it's a revolving line of credit, you can draw down some, pay down some, draw down more, pay back more. That's how it works. Well, it seems that Cohen drew that money down sometime after the loan was given. Incidentally, it goes to show you how valuable his business had become if he was able to get $20 million in personal loans. They were secured by those medallions, but that's still a lot of loans. Most of the time, business people like Michael Cohen use that money to increase their investments or just pay for the daily expenses of their lives. Cohen also bought a bunch of primo real estate, including a condo on Park Avenue in New York City. But when Michael Cohen got the mortgage to buy that property, he made a choice that would come back to haunt him. When Cohen applied for a loan to buy the Park Avenue condo, he didn't tell the bank that he had $20 million of debt. Instead, he only disclosed one of those loans, the $6 million loan. He hid the other $14 million of debt from the bank. Why would he do that? Well, we don't know for sure, but we can make a pretty logical assumption. The less debt you have, the better your finances look. And the better your finances look, the more likely you're going to get approved for a loan for your cool Park Avenue condo. So it's possible that Cohen didn't disclose all of his debt to the bank because he wanted to make sure that the bank thought he had a stellar net worth, and that would increase the chances that the loan would be approved. A few years later, he bought another ritzy property, this time an $8.5 million summer home. To pay for it, Cohen went to the same bank that loaned him the money for the Park Avenue property. And when he made application for the summer home, he again left the $14 million line of credit out of his loan application. But this time, he got tripped up. Somehow, the bank got hold of one of Cohen's old financial statements. On that old financial statement, Cohen disclosed the existence of the $14 million debt. Well, once the bank saw that, they got curious, and they asked him why he didn't reveal that monstrous debt when he applied for the Park Avenue loan and the summer house loan. Cohen went into fixer mode, and he lied. Cohen told the bank that the $14 million line of credit was never drawn down. If it wasn't drawn down, it wasn't owed. The bank told Cohen they weren't going to give him the money for the summer home unless he closed that line of credit, and Cohen sent the bank an email telling them that the line of credit was closed. That was a lie, too. Are we done? No. Cohen did it one more time. Later, Cohen went back to that same bank to apply for a home equity line of credit. He once again omitted that $14 million debt. On top of that, he misled the bank when he told them about the payments he was making on that medallion debt. He understated his actual payment responsibility by about $70,000 per month. The bank ultimately approved a $500,000 line of credit based on the fraudulent information he provided about his financial condition. But Cohen got away with it for the time being. It's sort of amazing that Michael Cohen even had the time to engage in his personal business transactions. It seems that he was being kept pretty busy by the Trump Organization. Among other things, he was jet-setting around the globe. In 2015, for instance, Cohen went to Russia. It seems that the Trump Organization was planning to build a project there. It was to be called Trump World Tower, Moscow. Cohen was apparently sent to Russia to try to move the project forward, so he and another Trump associate met with Russian officials. Talk about your delicate negotiations, huh? You gotta wonder, when you're negotiating to build a major project in Moscow, who's pulling the strings over there? Somewhere along the line, someone's gotta be filling in Vladimir Putin, right? I mean, the guy is basically a dictator at this point, isn't he? Vladimir Putin is trying to turn back the hands of time. He seems to long for the days when his beloved Russia was the feared Soviet Union. The days when his country controlled all of Eastern Europe and was a powerful player on the world stage. The days when the entire world was thinking about and worried about the power of Russia. There's a good chance that Vladimir Putin has some pretty nice memories of those days. After all, he was a KGB agent, which means that he was probably living a life of privilege while his countrymen lived a life of peasantry. And those countrymen, many of whom were probably the targets of his spy work and the victims of the Soviet regime, well, they would likely not share in his romantic view of the past. But it seems that as the functional dictator of his country these days, he's been doing everything he can to restore what he sees as the glory of Mother Russia. Well, what does that mean in the United States? It means that there's a renewed sense of fear of today's Russia, a renewed sense of skepticism. As the 2016 election neared, Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump were in a ferocious battle. The candidates' campaigns were doing what most campaigns do. They were looking for information that could hurt their opponent. In an apparent effort to turn up some damaging information, the Hillary Clinton campaign and the Democratic National Committee retained the well-known law firm Perkins Coie. The firm was apparently brought on to assist in that information gathering. Now, it's common for law firms to hire research companies to assist them in matters like this. So Perkins Coie hired an outfit named Fusion GPS. Well, looking for dirt on a United States presidential candidate isn't your run-of-the-mill research. If you want to uncover dirt on someone of that caliber, you need to hire someone who's spent their career digging for that kind of information. So Fusion GPS hired a spy. Well, he was an ex-spy, actually. Fusion GPS hired former British intelligence officer Christopher Steele. Seriously? That name could have come out of a dime store novel, don't you think? Christopher Steele, British spy. It's almost cliche. Well, Steele, Christopher Steele, he got to work. And the report he'd eventually create would be published on the internet and raise more than just the eyebrows of the American press and the American public. It would raise the eyebrows of the intelligence agencies as well. There's an art to fixing someone's legal headaches. Real estate developers probably understand that better than anyone else because of the nature of their business. They need fixers. They have to contend with politicians, administrative agencies, public interest groups. And the only way that they can get their big development projects approved, funded, and built is if they find a way to corral all of those diverging interests and make everyone, well, I don't know that you could say it happy, but at least pleased enough to get the project done. And for that reason, lawyers are an indispensable part of the equation. But it takes a special kind of lawyer. The lawyers that developers use can't just go out and threaten someone to get in line so a project gets finished. They can't just throw money around in payoffs. If they do those things, there's going to be a problem. I mean, forget about the fact that illegal things are wrong and it'll get them in trouble, of course. But even the legal stuff, people hear about it, the publicity is terrible, and you're not going to get your project approved. The key to being a good fixer is to be able to do it quietly. You have to stay under the radar. A fixer is only valuable if they can fix things quietly. But silence isn't the only requirement. It also takes a bit of judgment. A lawyer who plays the role of a fixer needs to know when to threaten. They need to know when to sue, and they need to know when to settle. They need to know when to throw money at a problem to make it go away and how much money will make that problem go away. That's not the kind of judgment that can be learned in the classroom or even in the courtroom. Truth is, that kind of judgment is a talent you're born with. And you need to be tough as nails, too. You have to be comfortable with massive amounts of risk. You have to be comfortable with the possibility of devastating failure. It's like walking a tightrope. If you fail, you fall and you die. When you're a fixer, if you fail, you fall and your career dies. And so too could the career of your client. When Donald Trump eventually ran for president, Michael Cohen left his job at the Trump Organization and served as Trump's personal lawyer. Now, what does that really mean? It's sort of up in the air. It seems that he basically did whatever Trump needed from a legal perspective. The beauty of being a good fixer is that their talent can be applied in a variety of different contexts, and that's probably why Michael Cohen lent his talent to the Trump campaign. In June of 2015, Michael Cohen didn't have a formal title with the Trump campaign, but he advised the campaign on press matters and, among other things, made television appearances on its behalf. The bottom line was that if Donald Trump needed something fixed, Michael Cohen fixed it. And if the thing that needed fixing was in the campaign, Michael Cohen would help out in the campaign. Midway through 2016, the campaign needed some help. In June of 2016, word on the street was that there were women trying to sell their stories about their rendezvous with Donald Trump. Obviously, Trump didn't want those stories to be told. He had to find some way to ensure that those stories would not see the light of day. Michael Cohen was brought in to fix the situation. The plan he came up with, well, it was pretty straightforward. Cohen is alleged to have coordinated with a media publisher. And the idea was that Cohen and the publisher would identify negative stories about Trump that people were trying to sell to the press. They would then buy the rights to those stories and make sure those stories never saw the light of day. Pretty simple. Find the stories, buy them, and bury them. Well, now all they had to do was actually find the people trying to sell those stories. That didn't take long. Donald Trump was popular, but when developer Donald Trump aspired to be President Donald Trump, his popularity went through the roof. So in 2016, the time seemed right for Stormy Daniels to try to cash in. Well, who do you go to in the States if you've got a salacious story that you want to sell? You know the answer. You go to the National Enquirer. According to court documents, someone in Stormy Daniels' team reached out to David Pecker, then the chairman of American Media, Inc., the company that publishes the National Enquirer. They told Pecker that Stormy was ready to go public with her story about the alleged tryst with Trump at the golf outing. Obviously, they figured the National Enquirer would pay big bucks for the story. What they didn't know is that, according to court documents, David Pecker was apparently the media publisher that was working with Michael Cohen. Pecker seems to have reached out to Cohen and let him know that they'd found a story that needs to be silenced. Cohen negotiated a deal with Stormy Daniels' lawyer. Cohen would buy her story for $130,000. But in return for the money, Daniels had to keep her mouth shut. And to ensure that she didn't blab about things, Cohen required her to sign a non-disclosure agreement. Sometimes those are referred to as NDAs. And by the way, this is the hush money payment you've heard about in the news. But what you might not know is that hush money payments aren't necessarily illegal. There's no law against paying someone to keep their mouth shut. Of course, if you're paying them to keep a crime secret, that's a problem. If you're bribing someone, that's also a problem. But there's nothing illegal about paying money to someone in an effort to get them to just generally remain silent. So when Michael Cohen gave Stormy Daniels $130,000 in return for a signed confidentiality agreement, he probably didn't think he was doing anything illegal. Slimy? Perhaps. But illegal? He probably didn't think so. But even if the arrangement was legal, it still had to be kept hidden. And that's because the entire point of buying the story was to bury it. So he couldn't just hand over a check to Stormy Daniels for $100,000 signed by Donald Trump. People would see that, They'd figure out what was going on. Then the entire hush operation would have been a waste of time and money. So Michael Cohen needed to create distance between the story and the person paying for the story. So he got inventive about how to fix that problem. And he did it by creating a scheme involving a shell company. The phrase shell company sounds pretty nefarious, doesn't it? Whenever you hear that phrase in the news, they're usually tying it to some company that's involved in money laundering or some other criminal activity. But the truth is, there isn't really anything illegal about a shell company. Shell companies are usually validly created corporations. Whether they're improper or not depends upon what you use them for. If you use that company, for instance, just to buy property, then it would be nothing more than a standard real estate transaction done with a corporation. But if you use that shell company to conduct criminal activity, maybe something that you don't want tied back to you, well, then that's a problem. So if you use a shell company to hide criminal transactions, that's no good. But if you use it to hide otherwise legal hush money payments to bury a news story, that's not necessarily a problem. And in the case of Stormy Daniels, it seems that Michael Cohen didn't think he was improperly hiding a crime. He thought he was simply hiding an embarrassing story. Cohen created a company called Essential Consultants, LLC. Cohen then drew money down from a line of credit he had obtained sometime earlier, and he deposited that money in the shell company's bank account. Then, Cohen wired $130,000 from the shell company to Stormy Daniels' lawyer. Later, Cohen was reimbursed by the Trump Organization for what it called legal expenses. Cohen, incidentally, continued to operate Essential Consultants, LLC as a consulting company. Well, eventually, Donald Trump would go on to orchestrate one of the most incredible political upsets in American history when he defeated Hillary Clinton in the race for President of the United States in November of 2016. After the election was complete, he was celebrating victory and getting ready to assume the presidency. But as Donald Trump was preparing for his new role, his opponents were preparing for a fight. Throughout the election year, the spy, Christopher Steele, had been looking for dirt, and he claimed to have found a dump truck's worth. When he was done compiling his data, his benefactors must have been both shocked and overjoyed. Christopher Steele had hit the gossip motherlode. Steele's report contained shocking allegations. It claimed that Donald Trump had been colluding with the Russian government. It claimed that there was a massive conspiracy between Trump and Russia to ensure that Trump won the 2016 election. His report also alleged that Trump was in Vladimir Putin's pocket, claiming that the Kremlin had compromising information about Trump. The allegations were detailed, graphic, and salacious. The report was released at a time that would have maximum effect. 10 days before Donald Trump took office, the website BuzzFeed printed Steele's explosive report. It was a 35-page memo entitled, U.S. Presidential Election, Republican Candidate Donald Trump's Activities in Russia and Compromising Relationship with the Kremlin. That was its official title, but it would forever become known as the Steele Dossier. The Steele Dossier was a bombshell in a couple of ways. First of all, it was incredible timing. It was released only 10 days before President-elect Trump was to assume office. Second, it was incredibly timely. The allegations in the report fed right into the latest fears of rising Russian influence throughout the world. Trump, of course, denied the allegations in the Steele Dossier immediately and fervently. But Christopher Steele had a solid reputation in the intelligence world, so the report had an air of credibility. Plus, the country was already on edge about Russian interference in the election. The FBI had actually already started an investigation into the issue. All that meant that the press was primed for this sort of story. And as a result, the mainstream media ran with the Steele Dossier. Donald Trump wasn't the only person angry about the allegations contained in the Steele Dossier. His fixer was pretty pissed too. The report claimed that Michael Cohen had been doing what he does best, fixing things for Donald Trump. Except Steele claimed that Cohen's fixing was about the election. The Steele report claimed that Cohen was an instrumental part of the ongoing relationship between Trump's campaign and the Russian leadership. Steele even claimed that Cohen traveled to Prague in the Czech Republic to meet with Russian operatives for that purpose. Cohen insisted that he never visited the Czech Republic. But people didn't seem to care. His meetings with Russian officials about the Trump Tower Moscow deal fueled speculation of some wider conspiracy with the Russians and the Trump campaign. Cohen provided his passport to refute the allegations and proved that he never visited Prague. But none of that mattered. The Steele Dossier allegations wreaked havoc in the Trump administration. Yes, the FBI had already started an investigation into Russia's role in the election, but the contents of the Steele Dossier turbocharged that investigation. Trump's Attorney General Jeff Sessions recused himself from participating in the investigation, which brought the ire of President Trump down upon him. Trump fired Sessions, but that didn't have much of an effect because Sessions' successor appointed former FBI Director Robert Mueller to act as special counsel and investigate the matter. The special counsel was charged with investigating whether the Russians interfered with the U.S. election and whether there was any link between them and the Trump campaign. The Senate Intelligence Committee was also investigating the Russian interference issue, and they called Michael Cohen to testify. An important part of their inquiry would be that meeting that Cohen had with the Russians. Remember, he did in fact meet with the Russians, but it was about Trump's potential construction project. The Senate committee wanted to look into that to make sure that it wasn't actually part of the suspected Russian plot to affect the 2016 election. They asked Cohen about when he conducted those meetings, what he told Trump, and when the contact with the Russians ended. In response to those questions, and while under oath testifying before the United States Congress, Michael Cohen incredibly lied. Cohen told Congress that the discussions about the Trump World Tower Moscow project ended by January of 2016, but they had actually continued until June of that year. The special counsel claimed that Cohen briefed Trump on those negotiations more than 3 times in 2016. Plus, emails and text messages obtained by investigators showed Cohen pursuing the project deep into 2016 as well. Cohen would later say that he lied because he was loyal to Donald Trump, and telling that lie was in Trump's best interest. But Cohen's loyalty wouldn't last much longer. One of the things they learned about the Steele Dossier after time went on and investigations continued was that it was a bunch of garbage. None of the explosive allegations were proved. And according to the Hoover Institution, government officials found that the dossier was compiled from hearsay and third-hand gossip from 2 low-level sources who denied the testimony when it was attributed to them. The only verified information that officials found was available from public sources. Eventually, Steele himself acknowledged to ABC News that, quote, not everything in the dossier is 100% accurate. The report was widely discredited and is now considered to have been nothing more than a political hit piece that contained mostly bogus information. You'd think that once that was made known to the public, Michael Cohen would have been thrilled. The Steele Dossier, the document that implicated him in Russian collusion, it was blown out of the water. Well, I'm sure that did please him, but I don't think you could say that he was happy. That's because once the special counsel investigation got started, the wheels of Michael Cohen's demise had been put into motion. Special counsel investigations might start out seeking specific information about a particular question, but they don't always end that way. Once an investigation gets underway and they start looking into issues, they seem to find a truckload of interesting and often damaging stuff. And when the special counsel Robert Mueller started shining a light on Michael Cohen, he found that there was a lot of dirt in the darkness. In early 2018, reports started to surface in the press about Cohen's payment to Stormy Daniels. And that prompted the special counsel to start to think about the nature of those payments. Instead of just seeing it as regular hush money payments that were perfectly legal, The authorities started to connect those payments to the campaign. They believed that if the payments were made to Stormy Daniels in an effort to improve Trump's chance in the election, well, those payments then would constitute an illegal campaign contribution. It was clear that they needed to find out more about Michael Cohen's role. And that's when they really turned the screws on him. In April, the FBI raided his home, his office, and a hotel room he was staying at in New York City. They seized documents, electronic devices, and recordings. Well, they must have found some incriminating stuff in that raid because shortly thereafter, the special counsel's office referred the matter to prosecutors in New York. After the prosecutors got a look at the file, it became apparent that Stormy Daniels was the least of Michael Cohen's problems. He probably realized that right when he heard that the banks he used for his medallion business and other financial dealings were starting to get subpoenas. When prosecutors start to send subpoenas, things are about to get hairy. Once the banks started to receive subpoenas, the press got alerted that something was going on. They found that those banks appeared to have felt uncomfortable by the way Michael Cohen was behaving. And when a bank thinks that their customers are doing something fishy, they have to report it. And that's exactly what happened with Michael Cohen. Now, we don't know which banks actually made these suspicious activity reports. It could have been the banks where he had the accounts for his consulting company, Essential Consultants, LLC. It could have been the banks that he was jerking around with the condo and summer house loans. Whichever it was, one or more of those institutions thought that something wasn't kosher, and in their mind, they had a legal obligation to report it. Those suspicious activity reports were filed and leaked to the New York Times. The paper trail that the prosecutors were collecting and the press was publishing eventually led the authorities to discovering some serious, potentially criminal behavior. Remember those loans that Cohen made to the people who leased his taxi medallions? It turns out he didn't include them on his taxes. The government claimed that Cohen failed to disclose the $2.4 million loan to the Chicago cabbie, as well as the $1.3 million loan to the New York driver. In addition, the government said that Cohen took steps to hide the fraud. He had the New York City cabbie, for instance, pay the money to Cohen personally instead of his medallion-owning entity. That's probably because if the cabbie paid the entity, Cohen's accountant would have seen it and would have had to include it in his taxes. But by paying Cohen directly, it would be much easier to hide the fraud. And it seems that there was more income that Cohen hid from the government. According to the Department of Justice, Cohen also hid a $100,000 payment he received for brokering the sale of a piece of property in a private aviation community in Florida. He also failed to tell the IRS about a substantial profit he made for brokering the sale of an expensive purse called a Birkin bag. Those bags retail anywhere from $12,000 to $300,000. He also left off of his taxes more than $200,000 in consulting income that he earned from an assisted living facility. In total, the government claimed that Cohen failed to report more than $4 million in income and that he ended up shorting the IRS more than $1.4 million in taxes. Not only would Michael Cohen need to answer for his tax evasion, but Cohen had to deal with the hush money payments too. The Department of Justice pursued the link between the Stormy Daniels payment and the campaign. They asserted that Cohen knew that the principal purpose of making the payment was to suppress the Stormy Daniels story to prevent it from influencing the election. And they argued that he coordinated with the campaign to get that done. That meant that Cohen was facing criminal charges for violating campaign finance laws. Michael Cohen ultimately pleaded guilty to 5 counts of willful tax evasion, 1 count of making false statements to a bank, 1 count of causing an unlawful campaign contribution, and 1 count of making an excessive campaign contribution. One of the prosecutors said, quote, Michael Cohen is a lawyer who, rather than setting an example of respect for the law, instead chose to break the law, repeatedly over many years and in a variety of ways. His day of reckoning serves as a reminder that we are a nation of laws with one set of rules that applies equally to everyone. And an FBI official also said, quote, the investigation uncovered crimes of fraud, deception, and evasion conducted through a string of financial transactions that were carefully constructed and concealed to protect a variety of interests. Shortly after pleading guilty to the Department of Justice matters, Michael Cohen faced the music in Congress. He pled guilty to lying to Congress about the Moscow Trump Tower matter. All in all, Michael Cohen was given 3 years in jail in order to pay a $50,000 fine. Cohen was also disbarred from practicing law in New York. Now, here's something that I find super interesting, and I really haven't heard anyone talk about this next idea. And I think it's an amazing bit of insight into what happened with Donald Trump after all this went down with Michael Cohen. Donald Trump eventually got charged by the Attorney General in New York State for these hush money payments, and he was found guilty in court there. Now, I'm not going to get into the details of that right now because it's a good 15 to 20-minute conversation on its own. If you want to hear that story, reach out to me on the Good Lawyers Gone Bad Facebook page. Let me know, or go to the goodlawyersgonebad.com and send me a message through the Contact Us page. Maybe I'll do a mini episode explaining that. But I'm not going to talk about those details now except for this. One thing we know is that the key witness in the trial that led to that conviction was Michael Cohen. When you listen to Michael Cohen's testimony in that case, and when you look at his statements to the press or read his postings on social media, you can see that he was bitter. It's a 180-degree change from his approach to Trump in the past. Well, when did that change, and why did it change? I alluded to it a little bit earlier. When you look at the timeline, Michael Cohen was fiercely loyal to Donald Trump all the way up until one defining moment. It was the day the feds raided him. Up until the time that they raided his home office and hotel room, Donald Cohen said he would take a bullet for Trump. But once that raid happened, everything changed. Why? The answer is because that's probably when Michael Cohen was smacked in the face with the reality stick by the IRS. It seems that that's when all of the income tax crimes were revealed. That's when all of the misrepresentations he made to banks in getting those loans was revealed. And that's when Michael Cohen realized he was facing serious jail time. And if you notice, that's also when Michael Cohen started talking about how his first allegiance was to his family, not to Donald Trump. That's when Michael Cohen started to cooperate with prosecutors to sink Donald Trump. Michael Cohen probably needed to protect himself from his own bad business decisions, and that seems to be why he turned on Donald Trump and cooperated with prosecutors. And here's something that I think is even more interesting. It's a little bit of a hot take from me. My hot take? If it wasn't for Michael Cohen's tax evasion associated with his taxi medallion business and real estate purchases, he probably never would have seen the inside of a jail. Michael Cohen's campaign finance law violations probably, and it's just my gut feeling, I don't think that his campaign finance law violations would have subjected him to jail time. Oh, sure, you can go to jail for violating those laws, and people have gone to jail for violating those laws. But when you compare the violations committed by other individuals who were put in jail for campaign violations, Michael Cohen's actions aren't that bad. The other people who have gone to jail seem to have committed either far worse violations or they did it in conjunction with some other crime like ongoing larcenies, bribery, or even extortion. I'm not saying that Michael Cohen's actions didn't violate the law. I'm saying that there was a good chance that they weren't jail-worthy violations. I just don't think that he would have got jail time if he didn't have those personal tax evasion charges as well. I don't even think he would have been sent to jail for lying to Congress. He got only 2 months for lying to Congress. Did you know that? He only got 2 months for lying to Congress, and they rolled that 2-month sentence into his overall 3-year jail term. 2 months! I've seen people get more than 2 months in municipal court cases. He lied to Congress and only got 2 months. If Michael Cohen didn't have those tax charges, he probably never would have been looking at jail time. And if he was never facing jail, he probably never would have turned on Donald Trump. It's all academic, I know, but I think it's fascinating. Do you want to hear the Michael Cohen story part 3? There's a little bit more that happened after he went to jail and testified in the Trump case. And for that matter, do you want an explanation of the Trump cases? If you do, let me know. Hit me up on Facebook. My page is Good Lawyers Gone Bad. You can go to goodlawyersgonebad.com, of course, and send me a message through there. I'm on Instagram and Twitter and all that kind of stuff. Please remember that if you enjoyed the podcast, to subscribe on the podcast platform, to like, to rate, and to leave a review. That would be wonderful. Thank you so much, everybody, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.